Today we're going to be checking out why Europe is insanely well designed compared to the US, I'm guessing.
Yeah, the US, maybe there's some issues. We got to figure out what the differences are and why it's so much better.
Let's jump into it. Here we go.
High-speed railways aren't going to be.
Oh, we're 30
This is a
seconds
map
in.
of Europe's mass transit railway system across 33
Wow.
countries. The yellow lines indicate the presence of a train line.
Let's see
and
the
as you can
US.
see, it's very dense. There are hardly any spaces where there isn't any coverage for railways. Now, if we compare this to a map
You
of
could get all the way from like
spaces where there isn't
southern Spain or like southern Greece all the way up to northern Sweden
So
and Finland.
But look at
and as
this.
you can see, it's
What about
very dense.
poor little Liechtenstein in
Oh
there?
no, Liechtenstein, my boy.
There's or all the Alps right here.
Yeah.
I actually once took a train from here. I think it was, I don't know, it was somewhere through the Alps. It was beautiful.
There are hardly any spaces where there isn't any coverage for railways. Now, if we compare this to a map of railroad tracks in the US, it's a different story. While parts of the US
South
have some good
Dakota.
mass transit, there are large areas of the country which isn't covered by Amtrak, the nation's largest passenger railroad service. But let me show you.
And Amtrak's not like a high-speed rail
No,
either.
it's pretty crappy from what I've heard.
Yeah.
Didn't you ride
Yeah, I rode
from here to Chicago?
from there to Chicago. It took a long time. I actually think it broke down, or it didn't break down, but there's something wrong with the tracks and we were stalled for a few hours.
I've never been on a train in the U.S. ever, other than the light rail in Minnesota, and that's down half the time too.
Yeah, and like it's really the public transport, like light rail in the U.S. is sauce. There's some sketchy areas on there.
Another map, this time of high-speed rail in Europe. Now obviously, high-speed railways aren't going to be as common as regular speed railways as they require excellent design, strict planning, and massive investment. And yet, as we can see,
Still a
high-speed
lot,
rail
dang.
is present in Europe, which is a stark contrast to the US, as you can see from this map. While the US does have some higher speed rail, like the Aquila line in the Northeastern Corridor, it's hardly an effective map of transport solutions. And
didn't even know
the
that
Aquila
existed, to
line
be
isn't
honest.
really that fast either. It can reach about 150 miles per hour, but averages less than 70. This is
Oh,
not the
so it's not
case
even
for
that
Europe's
high speed.
insanely well-designed railroad system. And you have to remember that Europe's system accomplishes this while spanning 33 different nations in a very diverse continent. What you're probably thinking, this is just because Europe is smaller than the United States, which simply isn't true. While the European Union is smaller than the US, continental Europe has an area that is about 1.04 times as much as the US. So we can dismiss this argument that the United States can't be that well designed
Does that
because
include Russia, which is kind of outside of the Eurosphere, kind of?
Probably to the Ural Mountains or whatever.
Yeah.
It's pretty big.
it's too big. Europe simply is better designed. But if you're American, you might not understand why railroad tracks or public transport as a whole is so important. I mean, driving a car works fine, right? Well, no, and Europe showcases why a primary focus on private transportation is so detrimental to a well-functioning transit system. Look at these maps. They show the US road network versus the EU's. And as you can see, the EU's road network is not nearly as impressive as the US's. And yet, when you look at some of the most congested cities in the world, European countries don't feature particularly prominently in the global rankings.
What about Istanbul?
Interesting
In
list
the world,
there.
European countries
Istanbul
don't feature
and Moscow, Kiev,
Bucharest.
Odessa. Interesting. Most congested cities. That seems. Where's Manila?
Yeah, this might be a little outdated. Manila and Jakarta aren't on there.
That's surprising.
particularly prominently in the global rankings. This is pretty shocking information because you'd assume that the country with a more expansive road network has a lot less congestion, especially considering the United States has devoted lots of time and money to their highways. So how come Europe is less congested when they have fewer roads? Well, it all comes down to disincentivizing the use of cars and, most importantly, making an attractive alternative. Europe does this by having both private and public transportation infrastructure, which technically the US has as well, it's just a lot worse. But on top of this, Europe makes
Never
it pretty
been on the New York
expensive.
subway, but I've heard stories.
I've heard stories. It's a crazy place, apparently.
I wonder if it's as bad as people say.
I don't know. It's probably like certain lines, maybe, or certain areas.
It seems like now it's hard to trust anything you see on social media because people make videos about things being bad just so they can get views. So
mhm.
it's hard to actually
to
tell.
buy, own, and use a car. This is achieved by having high taxes on vehicles and gasoline. In fact, here's a map of worldwide gasoline prices. As you can see, European nations are in the top rankings, while the US lies at the bottom, charging very little. But let me be very clear, it's only a good idea to make it expensive to drive a car if you have an attractive alternative, which America doesn't, but Europe does. I mean, obviously this wouldn't work in the US with its current transportation infrastructure, but in Europe, this is a great strategy because you make the roads less congested for those who actually need them and give everyone else an affordable and efficient alternative, being Europe's amazing public transport like
Not even joking, some people in the US consider like tax subsidized affordable transportation in the US as communism, and that's like people are against
The
that.
president himself does.
Yeah. So that's crazy. That's one of the reasons it might not ever work in the US.
Nope.
the trains on the railways. This is arguably the better strategy because even though the vast majority of Americans have access to vehicles at around 91% and gas is comparatively cheap, it still leaves 9% who don't have access to vehicles.
You're
What are these
screwed if you
people
don't have a
who
car.
can't afford a car supposed to do? I mean, sometimes public transport isn't even an option or simply too expensive for many. So you've now actively excluded those who aren't exactly the most well off from society. To make matters worse, some US cities actually got rid of their public transport to make room for more cars.
That's
I'm not
crazy.
joking. American streetcars like trams were actually removed to make way for bigger roads. Absolutely insane. Compare that to Oslo, Berlin, and Madrid, where discussions are underway to restrict or even exclude most cars from the city center. And let's not forget that when you have cars, you also need somewhere to park them. And this is where things start
There
to
ain't
become
parking
rather
lots in the
ridiculous. You see, the United
Not
States
to mention,
has
I was in San Francisco a year ago, and some of the areas try to charge you like $20 an hour downtown to park, like especially in the tourist area. $20 an hour.
That's absurd.
2 billion parking spaces for 250
billion?
million cars. That's 8 parking spaces per vehicle. In Europe, it's pretty much a 1-to-1 with around 250 million public parking spaces for 300 million cars. But to emphasize the ridiculousness of this even further, the area that the US dedicates for car parking is actually larger than the area dedicated for housing people. It's honestly
What?
unbelievable
That's
that people
crazy.
are being squeezed out of American cities due to regulators wanting to make more room for parking spaces. This simply wouldn't fly in the EU, as it has a whole policy dedicated to improving urban planning. See, the EU spent 115 billion euros between 2014 and 2020 to improve city design by making it smarter, greener, and more connected. Simply meaning they allocated funds to make their cities more efficient, more connected, and better for the environment. And better for the environment they really are, as the average resident in a typical Western US city, such as Los Angeles or Phoenix, contributes approximately 6 times more carbon to the atmosphere per capita than an average European city resident. This is purely the result of not having effective transport solutions, which saves resources and allows people to move about efficiently. And exactly that, moving about efficiently is something most of Europe's citizens are able to do as a result of the European Union. See, most of Europe's nations are in the European Union, which gives the EU citizens a number of perks, which includes a free travel area. This has been one of the most important achievements of the EU, as it makes it possible for an EU citizen to travel freely to other EU member states and stay for up to 3 months. All they need is a passport or even just an ID card. No visas, no trips to embassies, no form filing, just head straight over. This makes it incredibly easy to travel, study, and work in other countries and communities, and having this level of centralization is very important to good design, as it gives the smartest people the opportunity to work where they are most useful. And since good design obviously requires a lot of complicated problem solving and planning, this is very smart. Another smart thing is the incredible biking infrastructure we see in Europe,
The
perfectly
bikes.
illustrated by this.
People hate bikers in the US, and sometimes for a good reason, because there's a group of bikers who think since they can bike on the road, that they own the road, and they
Yeah.
like bike in a car lane because there are no bike lanes, and then they hold up traffic.
They think that because the rules kind of support bikers, but then they go as a car and then they'll just fly into the sidewalk and act as a pedestrian as well, and then fly back in, and just to
Yeah,
avoid
yeah.
like the actual traffic rules.
So they slow down everybody, and then people get pissed because they're driving in the middle of the road, and they're like, "Get out of the way!" And then they get angry. It's a weird situation. It doesn't happen where we live much because people don't really bike.
No,
And it happens apparently.
seems good to have some bike lanes.
Yeah.
Of bike path density in Europe. All the purple lines are bike paths, and there's clearly a lot of them, especially towards the left side of the map, but that's just because this is the home of the Dutch, the Netherlands. Now, the funny thing is, I won't be able to compare this to a map of bike path density in the United States, because such a map hasn't been made. At least
Wow.
I wasn't able to find any, and I can only wonder why. But anyway, what Europe and also the European Union has achieved is pretty remarkable, as it's hard to think of another set of such diverse countries where you would be able to travel so freely, in an efficient and inexpensive manner. I mean, you can literally get from Paris to Amsterdam, for example, in just 3 hours for around $30. Imagine being able
Not
to
bad.
travel all over Asia without any border crossings, checks, or visas, and being able to stay for months at a time. That would be truly amazing. And let's not forget that European design has always been distinctive and very successful. In fact, the continent's history of design and interconnectedness serves as a model for the rest of the world. But even though Europe and the EU are pretty great and have amazing infrastructure, they obviously aren't perfect. And I'd love to hear some of the reasons it might not be, so leave a comment down below if you have some thoughts on this. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the
All
next
right,
one.
very interesting. Our experiences with like high-speed rail, we've been to China, and their high-speed rail network is extensive. Like every city is connected with a high-speed rail. So it's interesting to see the US compared to Europe, and then Europe compared to our experiences in like China and Japan and stuff like that.
And the US is by far on the bottom of that list.
Yeah, way down. I mean, most of the railways in the United States are for shipping. That's basically all they're for.
And then, I mean, just getting from city to city in the US is the hardest by far, and the most expensive, and the most inconvenient.
I mean, even for flying from city to city, it's more expensive than it is in Europe.
You gotta fly on like Frontier, and then they're gonna find a way to scam you out of your baggage and yell at you for something. and-
Apparently, that's what Ryanair does, but and Wizz
yeah,
Air,
true,
but
true.
at least they're cheap.
Yeah, they're way cheaper. But yeah, that is very, very interesting.
Europe just knows how to design things a lot better than the US, because the US is just all about making money. I bet when those cities were designed, like a lot of those cities too, it was something in mind about some company making money that had a lot of influence.
That's the secret of the US right there. Some company making money.
The American dream.
That's the true American dream.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.